So today we're going to discuss the concept of principle of two weaknesses. Okay, I'm sure, as I said, many of you will be aware what principle of two weaknesses is. Simply put, one weakness sometimes is not enough. It's never enough. So we need more than one weakness, always. And I'm going to show you the principle of two weaknesses through this example because I believe this is one of the simplest examples to explain the concept of two weaknesses. Firstly, let's address what is a weakness. So, can someone explain to me in, let's say, 2 words? Tell me what is a weakness without telling me any moves. So, what is a weakness to you?
Something which can be attacked.
Pardon?
Something which can be attacked successfully.
Right. Anything that can be attacked. Um, Anything that can be attacked or exploited, not just attacked, also exploited. So in this case, it's not exactly a weakness. I also, before I mention that, I also like to say that anything lack of is also a weakness. This is something that in a lot of books we don't find this, but to make it easier to understand, a weakness is something that can be attacked or exploited, and a weakness is something that is lack of. And I feel like this explanation is quite simple to understand because think about it. If you have all your pawns on one specific color, okay, but you don't have a bishop of the alternate color, that means your squares are weak. So anything lack of is also a weakness. In this case, that is the case because right now we can see that white's advantage is simply being a pawn because black doesn't have a pawn. So also lack of being a weakness. So in this case, we're going to look at how this game is between Alexander Alekhine and Samish. Both, all of you should be familiar with both of these names. Alekhine was the fourth world champion and the only world champion to die a world champion, one of the only ones ever. Samish is also a very famous player. Um, uh, to those who don't know who Samish is, if you guys ever play King's Indian Defense, you will know what Samish is. Samish is one of the most popular lines against the King's Indian, and it's credited to this guy. So two very very famous players playing against each other, and this position comes on the board, and White plays Queen D4. So right off the bat, as I mentioned to you that um, a weakness is anything. Hang on, I'll just put it over here. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of suggestions for moves, but before we do that, we must first understand what is happening in the position. As I mentioned, you have a problem on the queen side because queen side is a weakness. And another feature that I like to mention is that principle of two weaknesses shouldn't just be on the same side. It's most applicable or most useful when it's on both sides. Because think about it, why do we create a second weakness? What is the reason for creating second weakness? Because the first weakness didn't work. The first weakness was defendable. And if the second weakness is on the, let's say, on the next square or the next file, chances are that your opponent will be able to defend that as well because most of the pieces would be there. So what the weaknesses suggest is that the weaknesses should be on both flanks or on both sides of the board, which makes it very difficult for your opponent to defend them. This is why we create two weaknesses. This example is from a classic book, Endgame Strategy by Shereshevsky, and I would recommend this book to all of you. It is probably one of the most useful books that I have read in my life. I read it very young, and it had a huge impact on my chess career. I would recommend all of you to look up the book, try to get the book, and try to go through the book because it is not complicated. He simplifies complicated stuff for you. Okay, so let's go through it. So as I mentioned, white plays queen d4 and black plays king f7. So from what I explained to you, it should be pretty clear what the idea now is, that instead of the queen side, where we already have a weakness, we're going to focus on the king side, because that's where we need to create another weakness. And this is exactly what Alekhine does. He uh, Abhiben. I'm thinking Adiban, man. I'm sorry. Abhiben. I'm gonna keep saying Adiban every time I say your name. I'm sorry, but the book is called Endgame Strategy. Let me just write it for you guys. I hope everyone can see the message. So this is the book. To those who are interested, I created a similar course that kind of complemented this, and I also added some more topics on it. And I published this course on Chessable, known as Timeless Technique: Strategic Endgames. It was sort of shall I say, a part two of Endgame Strategy. Okay, I don't know where you can get it, but there must be different ways. Probably Amazon. It must be available on Amazon, maybe on Flipkart also. I'm very sure it should be. I'm pretty sure it should be. Okay, so let's continue. As I was saying, that you already have a weakness on the queen side. Now you should focus on the king side, and this is what Alekhine does by playing bishop d3. Black goes queen c7. White goes g4. Now, idea of g4 is very simple. You want to just push the pawns and try to create a weakness on the other side. Also, what is applicable here is that notice that there is an imbalance in this position, which is bishops versus knights. And whenever we deal with imbalances like these, we have to make these imbalances in our favor. In particular, what I mean is that if you have a bishop, you should try to, or you should go for long range positions or open positions. And you can see that by playing g4, h4, g5, white is trying to do that by playing on both sides. When you have a knight, you try to play on one section of the board, because knights are simply just better than the bishop if you're covering one section of the board. But bishops are obviously much better if they're on both sides of the board, because bishops are long range pieces. So someone mentioned queen h2. Queen h2 doesn't work because I have queen d7 check. You mentioned that. So after bishop d3, black plays king f7 and white goes h4. Now, after playing h4, we have two ideas. One is to play g5, one is to play h5. And both of these ideas create some sort of a weakness in opponent's camp. So if I play g5, I can potentially say that, okay, f6 square can be a potential weakness, something you can attack or exploit in the future. And if you play h5, then you're immediately targeting this pawn over here, and which would most likely mean that black would either have to exchange, which means the h7 pawn could become a potential weakness, or if black just stays there, then you can take, and now this pawn is no longer guarded by the pawn on h7. So that could also become a potential weakness. I'm not exactly sure which one is better, but if I was white, I would probably go for h5 in this position. Black plays knight b6, and white goes h5. Now, this move certainly makes white's position a lot easier, because, as I mentioned, the g6 pawn is a potential weakness. Understand, guys, that this is not the only way to play this position. The position is already winning. Okay, there must be 10 other ways to win this position, but by creating a second weakness for your opponent, you just it makes it a lot easier to play for you. If anyone has questions, you can send me a direct message on Zoom. Okay, I see someone is raising their hand. If you have a question, send it on the chat and I will respond to you. Okay, so white plays h5, black plays g takes h5. I think a small mistake. Instead of this, black could have gone for knight d7. But after knight takes knight d7, white has a very interesting idea. Takes, and followed by queen check. Black plays king g7 and white goes f4. Now the idea of f4 is to firstly play bishop c4 and hope for some threats on f7, and secondly to play g5. And you see that if you combine both of these, the f7 square definitely is a weakness because that's a real mating threat, and there is no way to escape that threat. If black goes queen a7, g5, queen g1, king c2, queen f2, king b3, just avoiding all the checks. Black plays queen b6 and king c3. And slowly all the checks are gone. If queen c7, if anyone is wondering, just bishop c4, which is something we wanted to do anyway. And the mate is inevitable because not just f7, you also have g8 now also. Okay, so black then goes for g takes h5. White plays gh5. And now the goal is achieved. The goal being that the second weakness now is prevalent on the board. You don't just have the b pawn, you also have the h pawn. And if black, in some way, black didn't play actually h6, but if black goes h6, for example, what would be the weakness? Can someone explain to me what would be the weakness after h6? Correct. Absolutely correct. G6. I'm very glad that no one said h6 pawn, because once again, this would not be something that you can attack or exploit as much as you can exploit the g6 square. Very good. So black plays queen c6, bishop e4, covering the f3 pawn. And now black goes queen b5, and white seals the deal with h6. Now we have a solid weakness on h7. Nothing can be done about it, and it's going to stay for the rest of the game. And now look at this position from black's perspective. You already have the b2 pawn to worry about, and now you have the h7 pawn to worry about as well. So it's just practically not feasible to be able to guard something like this. Exactly, this would be a permanent weakness. So black plays queen b3, bishop c2, queen b5, and queen d3. Very methodical way to play. You know, I don't know how much you know about Alekhine, but Alekhine is very well renowned for his dynamic play. But he wasn't just a dynamic player. He was, as you can see, he's a very technical player as well. This is something that a lot of us actually overlook because he was such a great dynamic player. Instead of h6, white can play queen h. The queen is not on h. And if I play bishop h7, I think there's queen f1 check, queen a6 check. Oh, no, bishop h7, I have queen h5, don't I? And if queen b6, I play queen h7 with a check. So that would be eliminating a weakness, which is not exactly very good. So h6, queen b3, bishop c2, queen b5, and queen d3. As I was saying, that Alekhine has that reputation of being a dynamic player, but as you can see, he's a very, very technical player as well. Black obviously takes, white plays bishop d3, and now we have basically a winning endgame. There is nothing that black can do in this case, where black would survive basically. He goes knight c8, bishop h7, knight e7, king c1. I really don't understand why he played king c1 instead of king c2. It's something that I will wonder for a long time. But black played f5, b5, knight d5, and b5 now. Black plays king e6, king d1. Also a weird move. I would play king d2 here. Black plays king d6, f4, knight f4, and bishop f5. And this is, again, a typical example of principle of two weaknesses. You've got pawns on both sides. Knight, obviously, the knight cannot guard both of them. So white is easily winning. Black plays knight d5 and bishop e4, and okay, black resigns. And another interesting thing to mention is that black's king is on d6 right now, but if the king was on h8, this would be a slightly different story because that could potentially be a forced draw, because if the knight is able to sacrifice for this pawn on b5 and the king runs to h8, there is no way that white can win, even if white is a piece up.
Uh,
If
earlier,
I think
when the king was on e6, bishop g8 check would have helped. Now bishop g8 check.
So strange. I don't understand. This is as I was saying, this is so strange. I'm pretty sure this wasn't a proper example. Of course, bishop g8 check should have been winning, but this is very strange why I didn't play it. Thank you for mentioning that. But as I was saying, at this point, anything should be winning. And if someone said here there is a fork here, but if knight c3 check, you can just go king e1, knight e4, and h7, and the pawn cannot be stopped. Okay. Any questions about this game? Any questions about the topic of principle of two weaknesses? We're going to look at this in the next example as well.